Now for a review of what's making the headlines in the papers this morning, let's bring in our very own. I learned that they call you the Dr. 001 of Africa, Dr. Constance Ikoku.
Or the oracle of the headlines, you know.
The oracle.
Yeah, exactly.
Bimbai, give me a break.
Good to see she has joined the bandwagon.
Good morning. How are you in Lagos?
Very well, thank you. A little tired, but we fight the good fight.
Yeah, you were traveling back and forth. Good work, well done. And, good to see you this morning. Good morning, Yolanda. Good morning, Wenga.
Good morning, Doctor.
Yeah, how are you guys doing?
Good, thank you. The week is moving along swiftly.
It is. Wow. It is very fast. And tomorrow it will be TGIF.
Oh, yes.
So exciting.
Benga's favorite.
Already. All right, if you're just joining us this morning, let's look at those stories that are shaping the agenda for you in the paper review. We'll be kicking off with this day newspaper. This day front page centers what is probably the biggest story of today. Setback for electoral reforms as Senate rejects real-time results upload. On security, the federal government has clarified that U.S. troops on the ground in Nigeria are restricted to training and intelligence support. On the economy, with projected GDP of $334 billion in 2026, IMF tips Nigeria as Africa's third largest economy, ahead of Algeria. Daily Sun leads with Senate slashing election notice deadline for 6 months. And Southeast governors, leaders pushing for regional projects as the presidency pledges support. Vanguard focuses on the massacre in Kwara as jihadists execute 162 people. Harrowing tales of insecurity as U.S. Congress urges stricter action on global religious freedom. Leadership echoes the same electoral bill news about Senate rejecting mandatory e-transmission of election results. Daily Independent goes further on the electoral bill, saying there's outrage over the decision on electronic transfer. Meanwhile, INEC has finalized timetable for the 2027 general election. Fiber vandalism threatens national broadband drive with over 70,000 cases recorded in 3 years. Federal government unveils 25-year plan to unlock Southeast potential. And on politics, former Benue governor Suswam quits PDP. New Telegraph. NNPCL pulls the plug on Port Harcourt refinery, saying $1.5 billion project is a monumental loss. And Nnamdi Kanu appeals life sentence. The Punch says federal government is facing heat over that Kwara massacre. And The Guardian similarly raises concerns about the killings in Kwara and Katsina states. Let's see the international papers, beginning with iNewspaper. The dominant theme across most front pages is the political turmoil surrounding UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer and Lord Peter Mandelson. Labour MPs are openly criticizing his handling of Mandelson's appointment as UK ambassador to the US, amid controversies linked to Jeffrey Epstein. There's backbench revolt, including Angela Rayner and senior Labour figures forcing the government to release vetting documents previously withheld. Questions over Starmer's leadership and authority within his own party are growing, and there are calls for independent review of vetting and influence procedures. So iNewspaper reports that Keir Starmer is becoming isolated and his authority damaged. The Times, Starmer fights for his future over Mandelson. There's also a story of Bill Gates and the Epstein link. The Guardian writes that it's over for Starmer, with warning that his leadership is in jeopardy. Daily Telegraph headlines Angela Rayner leading Labour MPs in revolt and suggests that Prime Minister's leadership may be weakening after he admitted knowing about Mandelson's Epstein ties before appointing him. Daily Mail front page, Starmer in grave peril. Daily Star headline centers on Ghislaine Maxwell emails confirming a key photograph potentially undermining Prince Andrew's past alibi. Financial Times has the same news piece but also writes that satellite signals are being intercepted by the Kremlin according to spy officials. Metro.co.uk boldly writes, liar, liar, pants on, hired. Now let's see what the stories mean for everyday people. This is the newspaper. The Senate passes the Electoral Act Amendment Bill finally after the delay, but it rejects electronic transmission of results. It retains much criticized provision of old law, which gives INEC discretion on mode of transition. It slashes election notice deadline from 360 to 180 days. It has discarded proposed 10-year ban from politics over vote buying. And PDP lawmakers say the action is shameful and harmful to democratic consolidation. This amendment bill was supposed to strengthen the electoral process, but here we are. Benga, with the Nigerian Senate rejecting this electronic transmission, reducing the punishment, or even removing the punishment for vote buying. Does this decision set back efforts to ensure faster, more transparent elections, or is it a necessary safeguard against potential technological challenges?
Yeah, for me, it looks like a catch-22 situation, and a very complex one indeed, because the same situation that has stopped them from that electronic transmission of results real time is what is playing out again. So we need to look at why the Senate has, again, I struggle to say, but there's no other way to say it, has betrayed Nigeria again, because we all know that the epicenter of concern was that section 60 subsection 3 of that the Electoral Act of 2022 that gives the Commission, INEC, that power to use their discretion. Now it's saying that after the Form EC8A has been signed and stamped by the presiding officer and countersigned, that is when they can now transmit that election. And it's also given a subterfuge impression, if you ask me, saying that they did not reject electronic transmission of results. We are talking about real time. Nigerians do know what they want. And when you look at other subsection of that part saying that the voter's identification would only be by PVC. At an age where there is a technology where people can easily download and connect and do all this, I think this is a huge setback. Then looking at the timeline in section 28 of that clause and 29 of that clause, which gives which reduces that timeline from 360 days to 160 days, and also for parties to send their list, the final candidate list, giving them, just reducing it from 180 days to 90 days. I think that because the essence of this reform, from the expectations of Nigeria, the body language of Nigerians, is to strengthen INEC, to reduce electoral fraud, and to also encourage civic participation. All this has been dampened with the outcome of this electoral draft, and it's a real disappointment to Nigerians, and a setback to our to the build-up to our electoral future.
And in all these reports, we are not seeing that the Senate has offered. We're not seeing that the Senate has offered specific reasons why it has decided to go down this road, rejecting, the recommendation, because there was a recommendation on electronic transmission of results. So the National Assembly is now choosing a slower, more cumbersome vote collation. So this means that results will continue to be physically transported.
And I think I just want to step in here to clarify one or two things. I'm so sorry, there's always this delay when we're in different studios, but so the House of Reps had agreed to the proposal that had all of these reforms, and that had gotten people extremely excited. And of course, it now needed to go through the Senate before the presidential assent. Now, I think it's quite concerning to see this discord between House of Reps and Senate, because I think people were optimistic. That's what gave people the optimism that, well, if House of Reps was bold enough to do it, then the Senate will do it. However, now it's going to this conference, to this committee that will seek to harmonize it. Some of the language coming out of that process is also indicative and to be taken note of, which is that they're saying that that process will take about a month. And that 1 month means that they would have missed the deadline and that we'll have to proceed with the timetable for the 2027 election as it is prescribed in the Electoral Act of 2022. So in essence, what the Senate has done is they have maintained the status quo for 2022 while creating this conversation around what may happen for future elections. And so the gray area here is it possible for this bill to be concluded and assented by the president within 1 month? And that 1 month, it still gives room for INEC to extend by 30 days, for the declaration of the election. It still gives them 360 days if the election is to be in March. But how possible and realistic is that? And can these changes be implemented? So I think we're going to be stuck with the 2022 Electoral Act and all that came with it, the challenges that transpired with it. These new provisions, I highly, highly doubt that the harmonization will be concluded before the deadline to launch into the 2027 presidential election.
So what we're seeing is the Senate choosing to not modernize the electoral system in Nigeria, choosing the manual collation, which is which risks manipulation, throughout, the electoral process. But let's stay with this day newspaper. We have with projected GDP of $334 billion in 2026, IMF says Nigeria may emerge as Africa's third largest economy ahead of Algeria. Nigeria was trailing behind South Africa, Egypt, and Algeria in 2025. But with increased oil production, better foreign exchange liquidity, and ongoing reforms, things are about to change. Vimbai, what does this mean for Nigeria? From largest economy in Africa to fourth, and now possibly bumping up to third, very quickly.
Well, very quickly, this week we've heard all of these glowing headlines from, the World Bank and the IMF, and it's consistent with their rhetoric throughout this administration since those reforms came. We know that the Bretton Woods reforms are always about liberalization. There's a focus on, the markets dominating. Everything is about business, 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 business. However, the concerning detail from this report is that Nigeria's growth, or the size of the Nigerian economy, is hinged on consumption. They're saying that this is a consumption-driven economic growth. And that's a vast contrast to South Africa, for example, which sits at number 1, whose economic growth is driven by production, manufacturing, export, and so forth. So I think that's the clause. But in all of this, I think it's also important that we take a look at the inequality statistics, because even though South Africa sits at the number 1 spot, it still remains one of the most unequal societies in the world. What does this mean? It means that all these metrics that World Bank and IMF share with us, these big numbers, 300 billion is the size of your economy and so forth, that we need to contextualize them and realize that they mean absolutely nothing if we're not looking at the shared wealth, the shared prosperity of individuals. What is the quality of life? What is the access that the average person has to be able to make a meaningful livelihood and earn well and live comfortably and, self-actualize in these countries? So many people will look at this headline and say, from giant of Africa to number 4, now we're coming back to number 3. This is a positive step. But I think we need to look beneath these big numbers, these headlines and so forth, and ask ourselves, okay, from the giant of Africa days to these days, and now they're saying from number 4 to number 3, has there been an improvement?
Okay, let's move on to New Telegraph newspaper. Nnamdi Kanu appeals terrorism conviction. He filed a notice at the Court of Appeal where he challenged his conviction of and multiple life sentences. He was convicted of 7 counts, including acts preparatory of terrorism, incitement, and membership of IPOB, a proscribed organization. He was handed 20 years for IPOB membership and 5 years for importing a radio transmitter without license. He claims he was convicted without proof beyond reasonable doubt. Yolanda, let me come with you. With Kanu appealing his life sentence, is Nigeria at a crossroads between enforcing the law and addressing long-standing regional grievances?
That's a very excellent question, Dr. Constance, but we must also remember that the justice system doesn't make provision for personal sentiments. When the judgment was first passed, we saw that Nnamdi Kanu was very heated throughout the proceedings, and he made it very clear that he was going to go to the Court of Appeal. But if you remember as well, the trial judge at the time had discouraged him from representing himself, which he still insisted on doing. Now, terrorism cases are often very complex, and there are a lot of things that need to be looked at from a legal perspective. And it's an incredible risk for him to now want to take this kind of case on. So, I mean, there's a lot that we can expect, but at the same time, will his personal will and drive be enough? Will it be strong enough for him to hold through the complexities that come with actually going to the Court of Appeal? That's the big question to ask.
Right, but you know, I mean, it also goes beyond sentiment, because there were issues or technical issues which his team raised, upon which this sentence was based on. But beyond the courtroom, Kanu's appeal reflects deep division in Nigeria over his conviction. His supporters see it as politically motivated and unjust, tied to broader grievances in the whole Southeast region, and you know, issues about self-determination and how the state engages dissent from different groups of people across Nigeria. On the contrary, his critics argue that this conviction is necessary and it's about national security. But if it's necessary and it's for national security, how do you now see someone like Sunday Igboho, who has been pardoned by the president? He was also someone who was a separatist leader in the Southwest. But apart from that, Kanu's case is very complicated, like you mentioned. A lot of people in the Southeast, maybe young people, when he started this movement and talking about Biafra, they saw him as a voice, as a very strong voice at that. People in the markets, people in the streets, he was someone who they think had something, a principle and something that he stood for. But some of the elites were a bit, they're a bit careful and wanted a different approach to the issue of Biafra, to the issue of the Southeast region, because to them, the Southeast region is a region that is yet to recover from the civil war. They are still victims today, and so it was better to take a different approach rather than what Nnamdi Kanu was doing. So at the end of the day, it's still an issue of Nigeria and how it handles all the grievances, not only in the Southeast, actually, across the region in Nigeria, whether it's Northeast, Northwest, in the Southwest, how the Nigerian state uses brute force to respond to all the things that are coming from different regions in the country. Let's go to another story in Vanguard newspaper. Jihadists execute 162 in Kwara State. This attack occurred in Woro village, Kayama local government area, on Tuesday in what has been described as the deadliest assault this year. Reports say villagers were rounded up, hands tied at their backs, and executed. Many fled to the bush with gunshot wounds. The attackers were said to be jihadists who previously preached in the community, demanding that villagers denounce the Nigerian state in favor of Sharia law. Homes and shops were reportedly set ablaze during this assault. A policeman and 16 others were also killed in Benue State. Benga, once again, a very distressing story of communities exposed to brutal organized violence, despite repeated security assurances. The key question here is, why are these groups still able to strike at scale, and who is being held accountable here?
Yeah, you've really hit the nail on the head with the issue of accountability. And we've always said here that in a community, in a society where impunity reigns, the call for accountability sounds more like an attack. This, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, we've been here pleading for the president to send the bill for state policing. It looks like there's so much talk, no action. It's a time to move from words to action, to match words with action. Because even when you look at, today happens to be the 5th day of the Interfaith Week, and the theme is from prayer to action. So there is a lot of call on our leaders to take decisive steps. Because it's like a subtle way of compelling Nigerians to live by this very gory, very dastardly act that is globally condemnable. A situation where, because if we're to use key performance indications, Section 14 states clearly that the welfare and security of every citizen, it should be the primary, let's underline that word, primary responsibility of the government. And I think that we've watched this bleeding, we've watched this killing field for so long, and we need to take a decisive action. And I'm using this opportunity to plead, because the Zamfara governor said, give me state policing and I would end banditry in my state within 24 hours. Wow. Please, Mr. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, you need to pass this state and community policing bill. It's obvious that there is a lack of sufficient capacity to address this. We cannot continue to regurgitate this experience. It's too traumatic.
Right.
The issues are a bit more complex. But that's an important point. I'm just reading this article by Farouk Karogi where he outlines what happened. And in essence, he's saying that the district head of the village, Alhaji Salihu Umar, went to inform authorities that there was a group, the Mahmuda, were coming to try and indoctrinate people and to preach their message, and that in fact there was somebody within the security services, somebody within the authorities that he reported to, who served as an informant to the terrorists, who now came and inflicted this terrible massacre in response to the fact that the village head had gone to report that they suspected that there was some nefarious activity that was supposed to happen. So state policing is important, but it's also a reminder that there's now a huge influx and intersection. There's a nexus between these criminals and the people we live amongst and the authorities as well. And I just don't know how this is going to be untangled and how they're going to be uprooted from how deeply they've been able to intertwine themselves with the communities.
We're talking about local intelligence.
Let's quickly take one international story. The Guardian newspaper, the scale of the Epstein scandal is unprecedented compared to anything we've seen in recent times. UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer is in trouble, Yolanda.
Indeed, he is in trouble. You know, the MPs are really questioning his judgment over the controversial Mandelson-Epstein saga, and which they should. You know, issues being raised are about political accountability. You know, something we spoke about yesterday when we're dissecting the same story, a similar way, was the fact that money was given in exchange for government documents. Now, not many people seem to be addressing the elephant in the room, which is the fact that what did he want with those government files if he was not also exchanging them with other people or with somebody else or with other countries? So there's so much controversy being raised up. There's so much dust in the air, and the scandal is creating such internal tension within the Labour Party. And as usual, Keir Starmer is on the hot seat, just as he has been in the previous months.
I mean, he may not be in criminal trouble himself personally,
Absolutely
but
not.
the episode is a significant political test of his leadership, and we can see the whole place is shaking already. So much pressure on him. He did admit he knew a little bit about the Epstein link with Mandelson, but he didn't know the full extent, saying that Mandelson told a lot of lies.
Right.
Backbenchers are not believing him, so they want to see the entire documents and the vetting process to see for themselves whether it was a misjudgment on the part of Keir Starmer, that he knew much more than he's letting the public know now. Well, those were your headlines for today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Constance, for steering the headlines this morning.